All right, one more minute and we'll get started, everyone.
Mm-hmm. See so many familiar faces.
I know.
Alex, what's up, Alan? Alistair, Bryce, Ethan. How's everyone doing?
Yo, yo, yo. Like, love reading the chat.
All right, I think we're gonna get started since it's 7:05 now. All right, so welcome everyone. Thanks for coming to our workshop called Hacking the Coding Interview. This workshop, you're gonna learn about how to secure a tech internship and learn about the steps to getting an internship, so preparing and everything regarding that whole process. So start off with, we're going to do some introductions. So my name's David. I'm a third year computer science student. I'm a tutor for CSE 100 with NEMA, so that's advanced data structures. I'm working part-time right now at the Scripps Institution of Oceanography. What I do there is like mainly data management, like data integrity validation. I've also interned at a campus startup called Whistly. If you guys know Stanley, that's his startup. You should check it out. And I'm also the director of ACM's Hack.py workshop series, which will be happening this winter. And I'm also one of the Hack School workshop leads.
Awesome. Thank you, David. So yeah, my name is Thang. I'm a fourth year computer science student. Currently, I'm ACM's professional development director. And so my past professional experiences, I was a past intern at NASA. I worked as a web developer for 2 years at kind of like a medium-sized company. I also had a short stint as a market consultant. In terms of like my interview experience in the past kind of like few months, because it's interview season, I had the opportunity to have interviews on phone screens for software development and product management internships at a few Fortune 500 companies and various startups. In addition to, I'm currently working on 2 startups that are incubated at the basement as well. And yeah, so that's a little bit of my professional background and experience with kind of like doing interviews and whatnot.
Cool. So to start off with, if you're here, you probably already know what an internship is, but I'm just going to go over this really quickly. So what is an internship? An internship is basically a 3 to 5 month, I guess, meeting with a company where you get to interact with company staff and work on a project that is something that will add value to the company usually. Sometimes you'll get like menial tasks, but usually you'll get to work on something cool and basically make a product that will be used by the company after your internship ends. So the first thing is, where do you find internships? So there's a lot of really good resources for finding internships, a lot of places you can see. So I'm going to go over first job portals and then networking. So one of the most common places where you'll find internships, at least with UCSD, is Handshake. There's a lot of internships you'll find on there for various tech companies. It's really easy to use and super intuitive. You can also use the Jacob School of Engineering job portal. So on there, I think there's like around like 5 to 10 tech internships right now. But basically when you apply to these companies, you can say like, oh, I found this company on my school's career website. And sometimes like that can be a good thing because sometimes, schools can be feeders into like bigger companies. I know UCSD is associated with a lot of like biotech companies. So if you apply to companies through that job portal, it might be helpful for you. There's also Indeed. Indeed's a really good platform for finding jobs. LinkedIn, Glassdoor is also a really good one. Thang will go into that in a few minutes. Then if you're just looking for internships, you can always just search software engineering internship on Google and you'll find a bunch of job listings right there. In terms of networking, I think career fairs are honestly like one of the best places where you can find an internship. It gives you a chance to really meet like one-on-one with like an engineer or a recruiter, and you get to learn more about a company and just interact with someone that actually works at the company. So for me, like my first internship offer was because of a career fair because I think I left a good impression on the recruiter there, and it let me get an interview, and then eventually I got an internship offer. So I highly recommend going to any career fair you get an opportunity to go to because it's a really good chance to land that first internship. Company info sessions are also really good. So UCSD often like sends out emails being like, oh, like ServiceNow is having an info session or so-and-so company's having an info session. It's a really good chance to interact with recruiters for a company or just engineers, get your name out there a little bit, but also just like learn more about the company. Hackathons are also a really good opportunity to network with other people. You may not necessarily interact with many recruiters there, but you're going to meet a lot of really cool people that I guess aspire to do a lot of cool things in tech, and it's a really good opportunity to meet a lot of interesting people. Discord servers are also really important. Well, I don't know if it's super important, but basically through Discord you get to meet like a lot of people that share similar interests as you. Really good at coding, and generally you could probably meet a lot of cool people on Discord servers. And then office hours. So this is kind of different from internships, but usually if you go to office hours for a professor, you'll have the opportunity to, learn more about what they're doing. And sometimes they can offer you to, work on whatever research they're doing. So if you're interested in, pursuing more of the route of research, or for example, sometimes professors are, well networked with companies, for example, Gary Gillespie, you'll get the opportunity to basically talk with them. And, if you get in their good sign, they might help you, land your first internship.
Awesome, awesome. So yeah, so of course, as you guys all know, in order to get an internship, you guys got to apply, submit your resume, fill out like work a day, like 20 million times for each company. Unfortunately, that's not the only stage. I wish it was just as easy. We can submit a resume and they'll just give us an offer, yes or no. But unfortunately, there's a few, not a few, but a good amount of stages to kind of like the tech interview. So there's kind of three main categories or three stages when it comes to tech interviews: the coding assessment, phone interviews, and on-site interviews. We're going to go into depth into each one, but in general, of course, coding assessment is they normally, if you're applying to mainly software engineering positions, they, after you apply and they kind of like you, they will send you like a coding challenge, and this normally consists like of a few questions and whatnot. And phone interviews can be like with a recruiter or with like a hiring manager or even an engineer. And when it comes to like on-site slash like video interviews, like these normally consist of like 1 to 4 rounds of interviews consisting of like whiteboarding, technical, and behavioral questions. And just a good note that is like, although there's only like listed 3 stages, there can actually be like a few for each one. Like, for example, you might get like first a coding assessment, maybe like 2 phone interviews. Then even like now, since everything's like virtual, they can do like even multiple like on-site video interviews. So it really just depends on kind of like the company you apply for. So just make sure you do your research, and we'll actually show you later on how you can find out like for each company what's the stages are like for each company. Yeah, so the first one is the coding assessment. So after you kind of like submit your resume, a recruiter will kind of like screen it, or it'll go through like an automated system. And if you pass match enough keywords, like companies will send you what they call OA, online assessment or coding assessment. And what the questions generally entail are generally data structures, algorithms, and these are some common websites that you guys probably already done if you guys are familiar with coding assessments, like HackerRank, CodeSignal, HireVue is kind of like a new one I've been seeing. And besides kind of like the leak code style algorithm questions you'll get to, sometimes, and this happened for me, like I believe when I took the coding assessment for Acuna Capital, they actually gave multiple choice questions too, testing on like general CS knowledge. So I remember being asked kind of like object-oriented programming questions as well, like some math questions as well. So normally the coding assessment can consist of like data structures, algorithm questions, but also be prepared for kind of like general knowledge questions in general. And as mentioned before, the type of questions you'll get and the level of difficulty will generally depend on like the type of company or whichever company you're applying for. Generally, top like the FANG companies have like really hard coding assessments, whereas like banks, insurance company, non-tech companies has kind of like easier coding assessments.
Mhm. So the first thing we want to talk about is the phone interview. This is typically the first step in your interview process. Or actually, if you do get your assessment, that'll probably be your first step. But after you pass your assessment, you'll go to your phone interview. Some companies will go straight to the phone interview, but usually you get your assessment first. So usually they ask you some basic questions. This is like an HR interview, so they're not going to ask you about like, oh, like how do you reverse a linked list? Like they're not going to ask you like really hard technical questions usually. This depends on the company, but usually you'll talk to like a recruiter and they'll ask you to like talk about yourself. They'll walk you through your resume. They'll basically ask about your personal experience. Basically, they want to make sure you're like a real human and that you're like somewhat qualified for the position. It's just like an intermediary like screen process before you actually move on with the interview process. So after you pass the HR interview, you'll usually get a technical phone interview. So these are going to be, more complicated. They'll ask you basically questions on like your object-oriented programming knowledge, or I guess it really depends on whatever language you're using at the company you're applying for. But it's going to be a bunch of technical questions. So they can ask you, questions about, your language skills. I guess like if you use React, they'll ask you stuff about like web development. If you're applying for a job that's more focused on like Java, they'll ask you object-oriented concepts. So you really want to make sure you know exactly what you're talking about. This especially matters for like your resume too. Like whenever you list whatever skills you have in your resume or whatever coding languages you always have to be prepared to answer a question I guess like related to whatever you have on your resume. So make sure like if you don't really have too much experience in like one thing, like say for example, use like TensorFlow once and you put that in your resume, and you get a question about TensorFlow and you're probably not going to know how to answer it very well because you've only used it once. So you really just want to make sure that you know exactly what you're talking about, and yeah, that you only have it on your resume when you really know how to use it, I suppose. So I included the slide just to talk about, I guess, object-oriented programming concepts. So I actually got an interview where they asked me like, what are five really important concepts of object-oriented programming? And thankfully I got it right, but they really expect you to like know a lot of object-oriented programming knowledge if you're applying for a job that uses like Java or C++, a lot of object-oriented programming positions, I suppose. So you really want to make sure you understand the core concepts of object-oriented programming. So make sure you know all of these to some extent. Oh, yeah, we threw in a little meme right here. Yeah, this is kind of how some coding interviews go. This is definitely how my first few coding interviews went, at least. Not too good, but you know, with time you'll get better. So just saying, like, if you don't do well in your first interview, don't lose hope. You'll definitely get better over time. You just need to keep practicing and keep going at it. So yeah, so after you get your phone interview, you'll typically move on to your technical interview, which is going to be a one-on-one interview. I guess in the times of the pandemic, it's probably going to be a video interview. Sometimes it's just a phone interview, but usually you'll interview with an engineer or a manager of the company you're applying for. This interview can really vary in time length. It can last between like 30 and 60 minutes. Sometimes it can be even longer, but typically around 60 minutes is like the usual that I've seen. They'll provide you like maybe one or two questions for you to solve. So these are usually like leak code questions. Sometimes it can be like, sometimes really hard questions depending on the company you're applying for, like Thang said before, or it can be like easier questions if you're applying for like a less competitive company. You want to remember also during this interview that they're testing you on your problem solving skills. They're not necessarily testing you on your ability to solve the problem like 100%. They really want to see how you think about a problem. So even if you don't necessarily know how to solve a problem, you really want to just like talk yourself through it and make sure the interview knows that like you're trying to work through it. And you also want to like remember to ask questions when you really need help, because an interviewer wants you to like try on the problem obviously, but if you do get stuck, you should feel like comfortable asking a question and saying like, oh, like, do you think this would be a good idea to implement? Or I guess like asking like questions that could help you lead towards the general solution, but not necessarily a question that would like make the interviewer give you the solution. And one last thing, also remember to dress appropriately. So if you don't look like you care about your interview, like if you show up in like maybe like a t-shirt or like a graphic tee, they might think, oh, I don't really think this person really cares about working here. So I think presentation is really important. Just make sure that you look like you really care about what you're doing. And next up is the on-site interview. So once you finish your technical interview, you'll typically be invited to do an on-site interview. Since we're in a pandemic and everything, probably won't be in person anymore. You'll probably get another video interview, but these interviews that are on site will usually last a lot longer than the regular technical interview. You'll probably be with like more than one engineer this time. So sometimes it's like 3 engineers, sometimes it's 5, really varies from company to company. But basically it's going to last about like, 3 to 6 hours, depending on the company. You really want to make sure that, you're well rested before this on-site interview, because it is pretty overwhelming at times. So you'll usually be asked, a bunch of different types of questions. So you'll get the standard behavioral questions that you may have gotten in your phone interview, but this time you'll be asked, again, and they're just, assessing your knowledge and, your, I guess, compatibility with the company, I suppose. You'll also be asked like questions about your projects. So every time you put a project in your resume, you really want to make sure you can have a technical description that you can like provide to the engineer or the recruiter that you're talking to. So you really want to make sure you know what you're talking about, because, if you have a project in your resume, you don't know how to describe it, it's going to look pretty bad for you in the interview. You also want to make sure that you know how to solve technical problems. So you'll get a bunch of technical questions usually on this on-site interview. This can vary between like 2 questions to like 5 questions. It really depends on the company, but they're going to ask you a variety of technical questions to assess your ability. And these questions, I would say, usually around like leak code medium level questions. However, it can really vary from company to company. Sometimes they won't even ask you leak code questions. Sometimes they'll just give you a problem to solve, and you'll just have to work your way through it with like general data structures knowledge. Those are typically my favorite ones, because I'm not a huge fan of writing leak code, but some people are different. And then like I said before, it usually is more than one interview and lasts from 3 to 6 hours.
Awesome. Yeah. So Now we kind of showed you like the steps and the stages, but now is the most important thing about like trying to like get an internship. It's like you can know like what to expect and stuff, but it really comes down to like the preparation. So now we're gonna go kind of like a dive in on like how you can prepare for all these kind of like maybe intimidating interviews. So typically there's honestly just two kind of categories of questions you kind of have to prepare for. One of them, of course, is like technical questions. So as mentioned before and David said, it's like coding questions based on like data structures, algorithms. You're going to need to know how to whiteboard, which is doing it like actually on a whiteboard or on your screen, which David will go into later. And also like the knowledge about the skills required for a job. So like it was said, if you're applying to a job that requires Java, you've got to make sure you know all of your object-oriented kind of like concepts and whatnot. If you're applying to like an AI position or like a data science position, got to make sure you know all about like the statistics and all the required job skills too. And on the other hand, you also got to prepare for like the behavioral questions. It's just as important as these technical questions, and these can cover anything between like questions about like you and your experiences. You got to know your resume and all your projects inside and out, and how to answer sometimes those like situational behavior questions like tell me a time you worked in a team and it went well, or like what are your strengths and weaknesses. So like you also got to prepare for those.
Right. So how can you practice for coding questions? So there's a bunch of websites I listed on the right side here, and I'm going to go through each one and kind of describe what that website's about and how it can help you prepare for your interview. So the first one is obviously LeetCode. So LeetCode is the most common interview question website, I suppose. You'll find a lot of really good interview questions on here. I'm actually going to do a quick demo of LeetCode. Hopefully this works right. But LeetCode has a lot of different sets, I suppose, of questions. One of the most common ones that I actually used to prepare was the top 100 interview questions. So typically these will be, I'm trying to find it right now, top interview questions, there you go. But it has a wide variety of different types of questions you might be asked. For example, you might be asked like a bunch of array questions. So it's really important that you understand, how to manipulate arrays, how to solve some interesting problems with arrays. Two sum is a really common one. I know a few friends that got asked this problem. I think someone actually told me that their friend got this question on a final interview before they got offered their internship. So I highly recommend knowing two sum, but all of these questions are really important, not just two sum, obviously. But also manipulating strings is really important. Understanding linked lists. I think in general, just understanding your data structures is really important. So if you haven't taken a data structures class yet, I will put some resources at the end of the presentation that you can use to practice data structures. But generally knowing your data structure is super important. Trees, another data structure, various data structures involve trees, but you should understand how trees work, especially binary trees. Sorting and searching, dynamic programming. These are typically the hardest interview questions that I've gotten. Dynamic programming is a bit of a challenge at first, but if you keep doing more and more problems, you'll definitely get the hang of it over time. These are regular design questions and some math questions you might not find too often. I know FizzBuzz is asked sometimes by companies, so I highly recommend knowing FizzBuzz. I know I think this was asked in Google final round as well, so definitely know FizzBuzz, but this is a really good set of questions that you can use to practice. If you do buy the LeetCode Premium, they also have specialized questions for different companies. So this one's for the Google interview, Facebook, Microsoft, Amazon, etc. And then one thing that I do that I've actually been really bad at doing lately is the LeetCoding challenges every month. So as you can see here, I have not been keeping up with my October LeetCoding challenges, but this is just one way to kind of, I guess, motivate you to do a problem every single day. And I think that's kind of a good, thing to do. Just practice one problem a day, before you go to bed, or just whenever you have 30 minutes of free time, just try to work through one LeetCode problem, because, over time, that's say you do one a day over a month, that's 30 LeetCode problems you solve. And that's already a big dent in, LeetCode problems that you could do. So yeah, definitely just try to be diligent with practicing LeetCode or, other coding websites. But I think one thing that's really important is just, taking the time to actually do these problems and practice, because, practice does make perfect after a while. The next one I'm going to talk about, I'm not going to go back into presentation mode because I'm just going to demo this again, but code signal is another one. So a lot of companies will send out code signal assessments once you pass their resume screening. Code signal is not very loved by people. I've had some bad experiences with code signal, but it is a website that you can use to prepare for interviews. I'm actually not going to log into my account because I don't want to show over my score. It's kind of embarrassing. But typically they'll give you a score that's associated with, I guess, your skill level. Don't take this to heart, honestly. You have to take basically an assessment, a general coding assessment, where they'll kind of see like your general ability to solve problems. The scores range between like 600 and 800, 800 being like the best score you can get, and like 700 being like pretty good, and then 600 being like you need to work on it a little bit. So I'd say like a good code signal score is probably between like 720 to like 800. But yeah, don't worry about code signal too much if you don't have a great score. What really matters is that you just practice and you keep trying to get better at coding. So yeah, code signal is a really good resource that you can use. Well, in my opinion. HackerRank's also another common one that you'll typically have OAs sent to you on. So I'm gonna log into my HackerRank account actually, but this is very similar to Code Signal where you'll get coding assessments, but they also offer resources for general interview prep. I know they have one thing. I guess I have to log in now. I don't know if I set it up with GitHub or not. Oh, okay, yeah. So you can get your skills certified. The only one that I've done actually is Python. But this is kind of like a general way to assess like your general ability on certain coding languages. So, I'm glad to say that I have basic proficiency in Python at least. I think I'm a little bit better than basic, but I haven't taken those other assessments yet. They also have this little interview preparation kit that you can do if you want. And then they also have, general skills available for practice for a variety of different languages. So I think this might be a little bit more organized than LeetCode if you want something more specialized in a certain language. So if you want to get some more Java practice, you can use Java, React. Yeah, so generally HackerRank's pretty good for just preparing you for the actual OA. While LeetCode is more focused on preparing you for, I guess, like coding questions in general. So I wanted to give an honorable mention to Geeks for Geeks. Geeks for Geeks is not a coding website. It's more of a general like object-oriented programming knowledge website. Actually, I wouldn't even say object-oriented programming. I'd say like computer science knowledge. You'll find a lot of that on Geeks for Geeks. Geeks for Geeks has definitely saved me in like CSE 21 because it has a variety of stuff on like general like computability theory. But you can see here like they have a bunch of different topics on different languages. So Java, C++, interview preparation, generally just a lot of like really good knowledge you can have. It's more of like a Wikipedia than like, an interactive website, but I highly recommend checking it out to brush up on general concepts. So yeah, honorable mention. All right, and I'm gonna go back in the present mode. All right, so whiteboarding. So I highly recommend practicing, oh, this is not full screen. I highly recommend practicing whiteboarding with like friends or, just like yourself, I guess. But when you're solving a problem, one thing, like I said before, that interviewers really want to see is that you can explain your way through a problem. So you really want to walk yourself step by step on exactly how you're solving that problem because an interviewer wants to see how you think through a problem. That's like one of the gauges they'll see to see if like you'll be able to work in teams at the company or if you're able to solve a problem in an efficient and like methodical way. So you really want to make sure you practice whiteboarding. You can do this by even like getting a whiteboard or drawing on your tablet, just like I guess drawing out the process and also just explaining your way through it. Yeah, but I highly recommend whiteboarding. If you find a group of friends, like I have a little group of friends that I practice whiteboarding with. So I highly recommend like, asking your friends, hey, do you want to practice whiteboarding? Because it's a really good way to generally just practice for interviews.
Yeah, and then just quick funny story about whiteboarding in my experience. I remember like my first kind of experience doing like a whiteboard question. It was over the phone recently, I think like 4 or 5 months ago. And up until that point, I would say I was like decent at like LeetCode. I was able to do like easy problems and like no problem. But I never whiteboarded before. I just did everything on LeetCode on kind of like all these like Code Signal, HackerRank, etc. I remember during the phone interview, I had kind of like, so I had a notes with me and whatever, right? But remember the interviewer asked me how do you reverse a string? And like I couldn't think of how to do it. Like I swear I'd done this problem like at least like 20 times. But when it came on kind of like to whiteboard it, I couldn't do it. So that's why like you may be good at doing like coding assessments and stuff like that, but you gotta make sure you can practice whiteboard so you can kind of like explain it visually to like employers or the people interviewing you and whatnot.
Definitely.
So next, yeah, now we're going to kind of cover behavior questions. Like I said, just as important as kind of technical questions. So when it comes to behavior questions, I like to break it up into like 3 different types. First are the questions that revolve around kind of like who you are. So this in sense is like the elevator pitch. Typically in a phone screen, that's always like the first question they ask you. They ask like, tell me a little bit about yourself. And yeah, so these are the questions like you gotta prepare for, like what are your strengths, what are your weaknesses, and all those types of questions. Next are kind of like more questions related to your experiences and resumes and whatnot, like to what was like your greatest impact or what was your best experience? What did you do at this certain company you worked at? So you've got to know your resume inside and out. And situational questions that kind of like more harder ones to think about sometimes, like, oh yeah, tell me a time when you worked in a group and things went well. Tell me a time where things did go well, et cetera, et cetera. So a big question comes out like, how do you prepare for these? And here are like a few memes that I pulled kind of like from the internet. But normally behavior questions are generally overlooked. Most people think they can just like wing it on the spot. But sometimes winging it doesn't really work out sometimes because like these questions you do honestly need to prepare for.
Yeah.
And the best way to do it, kind of like whiteboarding and all other kind of like preparing for like leak coding, all that good stuff, is to do mock interviews with friends. It's funny enough, I actually did a mock interview for like a phone screen with a few of my friends today. And essentially, yeah, I would suggest just getting like a list of behavior questions like, you just need to go to Google, type in like, what are the top 10 phone screen interview questions, and then just switch off, like spend 20, 30 minutes, you interview a friend and have a friend interview you, because that's honestly like the best way to get good at these. And as a person who's like, in addition, who's done interviews and I've given a good amount of workshops for ACM, and honestly, in the beginning, it gets hard, but like as you do it more, you get more accustomed to kind of like knowing how to talk impromptly, um, knowing just how to like speak ideas that you wrote down on the paper. So mock interviews, the best thing you could do, not just for technical questions, but for behavioral questions as well. And yeah, websites to find behavioral questions, Glassdoor, Google, of course, Google, in addition for it, in addition to Google being kind of like the search engine to all our life's problems, you can also find it, use it to like look for behavioral questions. Like I said, just type in like top 10 behavioral questions, top 10 situational behavior questions, all that good stuff. And if you want to actually find out like what type of questions are being asked at a certain company, Glassdoor is your best friend. So if you guys aren't familiar, Glassdoor is essentially like a Wikipedia of all companies that displays kind of like review, like employee reviews, average salaries, what their benefits are. But the best thing is people post kind of like interview questions that they were asked before. So typically before an interview, I would always go to a Glassdoor and go to like their interview section and kind of search up like, oh yeah, product management intern, what questions do they ask there? And normally people like list the questions, and sometimes people even like have the answers to the question as well. This is really useful, especially if you're applying to like a really hard company like a quant firm like Acuna Capital, Citadel, where they ask like really hard questions and they're not like the typical leak code and all that good stuff. So checking out Glassdoor, figuring out what the questions are, is an extremely great resource to find out like what you're going to be expected to like know in a sense. And now we're going to get into study methods. So far in this workshop, we covered like what are the stages, how to prepare, but the most important thing is how to study. And spoiler, this slide right now is LeetCode. LeetCode is by far the best way to prepare for any software engineering kind of internships. In addition to like the problems that they offer to you, they also have kind of like a platform where you can do like mock interviews. As David said, there's like collection of questions, top interview questions, top algorithm questions too. And in terms of study methods, best way is keeping yourself accountable, whether it be in like a group or following like LeetCode monthly challenges. Just like stay consistent with it. Just one or two problems a day. Even when you're super busy, instead of doing, let's say, a medium question, just do an easy question. And the reason why is because as you do more LeetCode, you start to realize patterns, right? Like I would say at a high level, the questions that are being asked during these interviews are like revolve around the same 10 to let's say 20 kind of like coding concepts. And as you practice more, you start to realize all these patterns. And eventually you can kind of like figure out like what they are and how to debunk every type of questions too. In addition to kind of study methods on LeetCode too, it's a really good resource to like look at YouTube videos on how LeetCodes are being solved. As we all know, Jaden, somebody who's in our workshop right now, he's recently started a YouTube channel that does LeetCode. So everybody make sure to check out his channel. But in terms of solving LeetCode, I would recommend, and I actually got this tip from like a few people really good at leak code is try to solve the leak code 30 minutes to an hour of like not looking at any resources, even if it's super hard. Just try to think through it, try to like build all that problem solving skills. Then maybe after 30 minutes, if you can't solve it, you can look at the answer. Look at the answer real quick, figure out like what you were doing wrong or like what you missed. Step away from your computer for like 30 to 60 minutes and then go back and do the problem with like a fresh brain in order to like maximize the knowledge that you get out of it. And some other ways to stay sharp for coding questions. One is you can do competitive programming. Code Forces is a really, really good website for you to like compete against others in coding challenges, but also just like enhance your skills as they offer a little bit more like mathematically type questions compared to leak code. Next is a really good book that almost everyone uses is Cracking the Coding Interview. This book really covers like all the topics and patterns you really need to know just to ace or hack in a sense the coding interview. Also, the author also talks about like what the interview process is like at like various companies such as like Google, Facebook, Amazon. So it's a really good read, and it's only like $20 on Amazon. And the last way to stay sharp for these coding questions is just the code. And I know for the most part, if you're a computer science major, you probably do a lot of like programming projects, maybe side projects, compete in hackathons. But just doing that prepares you for all these coding questions too, is because like as you like learn from your classes, do your own projects, you kind of figure out like the best way to like organize your code, learn all these different concepts. So honestly, just start coding.
All right, so I wanted to talk about some super relevant classes that you definitely should, take a lot away from. So if you're a first year or if you're like an early second year and you haven't taken these classes yet, I really recommend like paying really close attention to everything you learn in these classes because I would generally say these are the most important classes that you'll take at UCSD because most of your coding interviews are going to be, about concepts that you'll learn in these classes alone. So to start off with, you have CSE 12, taught by, Gary Gillespie, the famous Gary. And then also, I think Gregory Miranda also teaches CSE 12, but it's a basic data structures and object-oriented design course. So you'll learn a lot about, data structures. I think Gary's, at least from my experience in Gary's class, you'll learn like, C++, C, and I think Java is also covered in that course. But it's mainly focused on object-oriented design. So you learn about like abstraction, inheritance, a bunch of really fun and confusing concepts that you'll eventually get the hang of over time. But I really recommend paying really close attention to this class. You'll get a lot of really good coding experience in this class, but you also learn a lot about, object-oriented design, which are common questions that you'll find in interviews. Another really important class is CSE 100. I left my favorite professor here, Professor Nima Moshiri. So advanced data structures, you really want to know your data structures like inside and out because, when you solve a problem, like chances are there's probably a data structure to solve it with if it's not like a DP problem. So you really want to make sure you understand just how to solve data or how to use your data structures, when to use them in the right place, and like time complexities, all that is all really important for interviews. Um, and then also CSE 101. So this is design and analysis of algorithms. I'm taking this course this quarter with Miles Jones. I'm not sure if Mia Minnis has also taught it, but she's also a really great professor. She teaches CSE 20 and CSE 21, I believe. But you'll basically learn a lot about like algorithms. Like right now we're learning about like EFS and DFS, Dijkstra's algorithm. So it's really important, like a bunch of different algorithms for your interviews because you never know when you'll encounter it or whenever you might need it. There's a lot of times like you never really realize like you could use this algorithm here, but after you take a class like CSE 101, you're like, oh, I can kind of see like how I can use this algorithm to solve this problem. So I really recommend like paying very close attention to all these classes because you never know when you're going to need to use knowledge that you learn from these classes. So I also wanted to go over some general resume tips. I don't want to touch too much on this, but I'm going to go over ACM's little list of resume tips very quickly, and then I have another slide on resume tips. But I really recommend like going onto this list and just like going through your resume and fine tuning it and making it like super polished, I suppose. But I think this list was mostly composed by like Kendall, Alistair, and Bryce, and they're all like really smart people that are very accomplished. So I highly recommend listening to their advice. So yeah, impressiveness is really important. Like, the aesthetics of your resume, you want to make sure it looks nice. You want to make sure it kind of stands out a little bit. You don't want to just be like another number to a company. Spacing is really important. So you don't want to have everything like super close together. You want to make sure you have proper margins. Like some people like to really cut their margins down. And I know like that really messes up with a lot of like ATS software. If you don't know what ATS is, it's basically like a robot that scans your resume and like parses all the information out of it. So you really want to make sure that, you have your spacing right. General formatting. So, I touched on this in like the other slide, but stay on one page. You definitely want to stay on one page at all times, because if you go over one page, you just look bad. Like a lot of people are like, well, like I have all this experience from high school. I did all these things and I really want to highlight them on my resume. But the thing is, a recruiter takes maybe like 20 to 30 seconds to look at your resume. They're not going to want to read through like more than one page. They want to see everything they need to know about you right on one page. And you just have to put it on there. I mean, I worked as like an RA last year, for example, and I consider that really good leadership experience, but I also had a lot of technical experience that I wanted to highlight. And unfortunately, because being an RA is not necessarily something that a company really cares about, I made the decision to not put that on my resume. However, like say for example, you don't really have that much experience doing technical stuff, maybe something like being an RA would be important to have on your resume. But that was just my situation. It really varies from person to person. But just remember to have everything you need on one page. Um, I'm actually not going to go through this, but I highly recommend just like taking the time to go through this. I'm going to cover some more tips on the next slide. So yeah, so like I said before, first thing I put your resume on one page. Keep it to one page. Don't make it longer. Put your education at the top. So you're going to UCSD right now if you're in this workshop. So you want to make sure you highlight your experience at UCSD. You want to put like your relevant coursework. If you want, I put in my education section like organizations I'm involved in. But you want to put like your GPA up there. Like I said in the next bullet, you probably only want to have your GPA in there if it's above a 3.0. You can also use your major GPA if that's higher. But typically companies, want to see that, you work hard at school and that you have decent grades. So please only keep your GPA on your resume if it's above 3.0. I mean, that's just my opinion, but I think that's pretty good advice. I also think descriptions are really important. So you want to make sure you're super descriptive on what you're talking about. So for example, this don't says created a database to track applications. Well, what kind of database software did you use? Like, how did you track applications? Like, what was the impact that you actually made? So one way to phrase this so you can improve it is like increase staff efficiency and productivity by 25% by redesigning the company database. Another way you could also improve this is like introducing like the language that you use. So for example, you could say in a PostgreSQL database or a MySQL database, you want to be specific and you want to like measure the impact that you made. Another really important thing is to use action verbs. So when you start off your resume, like when you have your description, your resume, you want to make sure you start with an action. So for example, like created is an action, even though this is in like the don't section, you still want to use like an action verb. For example, increase, like that's an impact that you actually like visibly made at this company. So you really want to make sure you highlight the actions that you took. You also want to demonstrate just like a bunch of different things. For example, your technical skills, your knowledge. So one thing you can do if you have like, a bunch of projects and a bunch of experience, you can bold in your like languages that you use. For example, like if you use Python, you can bold like Python. It stands out to recruiters. It makes them know like, okay, like this person obviously has experience in these fields. And, if they're speeding through your resume, it'll stand out to them. You can also highlight your ability to work in teams effectively. So, a lot of companies care about soft skills. If you're working at a company, more than likely than not, you'll probably be working in a team. So you really want to highlight your ability to work in teams. Generally like personal qualities such as like conscientiousness and initiative. Like I said before, you really want to like stand out to a company. You don't want to just be like another person that like is applying. I think highlighting like something unique about yourself is pretty important, and it can really make you stand out amongst like a wide pool of applicants. Okay, so we're reaching the end of our presentation now, but I wanted to go over some like other resources that you can use to generally prepare for the interview. So like I said before, Nima's data structures course is really good. We use this in his class. I think he still uses this in his CSE 100 class, but if you haven't taken a data structures class yet and you'd like to learn a little bit more, you can click this hyperlink right here and it'll bring you to a Stevic page. I think if you log in with your UCSD email, you should have free access to that. But yeah, if you're wanting to learn more about data structures, definitely check that out. This is another resource for just general coding interview tips. We already highlighted a lot in this PowerPoint, but this goes a little bit more in depth on certain sections of the interview. And then one thing that I really want to emphasize is CS Discord channels. So I've used these two channels, cscareers.dev and the CS Majors Discord channel, Discord channel to find a lot of internship postings. So they have channels specifically just for posting internships, and sometimes they'll post like 5 a day for like a wide variety of companies. So I can't really emphasize this enough. Like, I really recommend joining these Discord servers and like looking at their internship opportunities because they have everything in one place. It's updated, and like, if a company makes a new listing, you might not know about that immediately, but if you're in this Discord channel and someone posts it, like you'll know pretty fast. And I believe like statistically speaking, if you apply for a company within the 48 hours of them actually listing that application, you have like a much better chance of actually reaching that like OA or that first interview. So yeah, definitely like try to stay up to date with internship postings. And this is a really good place to basically, find those listings, I suppose. And I'm going to also highlight the ACM Discord, of course. I think a lot of ACM members are, great programmers, and you could really learn a lot from them. It's also just a really social community where you can meet a lot of, really interesting people. So if you haven't joined the ACM Discord already, I really recommend checking it out and talking to some people in ACM. And I think this brings us to, okay, so next week, we're also going to be highlighting, we're going to be going over resume critiques and mock interviews. So we'll have a little segment about like, what's important for your resume. I already went over it a little bit in this presentation, but I'm going to go a bit more in depth on what's important for a resume in this presentation. And then we're also going to have a resume critique section. So if you're interested in getting your resume reviewed, you can click this link right here, or you could scan this code and fill out the form. And basically what that will do is sign you up for a resume critique, and you'll be able to be paired up with a volunteer that will help you go over your resume and, highlight what's, good, what's bad, and, just generally just go over your resume. We're also going to be having mock interviews. So if you'd like to get mock interviewed, feel free to sign up there. We only have a limited amount of volunteers, so I can't guarantee that you will get a mock interview. However, we will be going through, each of the people that applied and choosing people that we think would deserve a mock interview. So please take the time to, fill out these these forms if you're interested in getting your resume critiqued, or if you're interested in getting a mock interview. And this finally leads us into our panel Q&A section. So I think the panel can come on.
I'll pin them to the spotlight.
Yes. So in our panel, we have Jaden. Jaden, do you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, hey everybody. I'm Jaden. By the way, good presentation. I really resonate with a lot of the stuff you guys are saying. It's very good advice. But yeah, I'm Jaden, third year, CS major here. Currently taking off season at school, and I'm interning at Tesla. And then I'll be going to Salesforce next summer. Yeah.
Cool. And we also have Stone joining us.
Hi, y'all. Yeah, I'm a sophomore. I'm studying computer science and cognitive science. I don't I'm not doing off season like Jaden. But last summer I entered at Launch Dark League. Before that, I entered at another startup. This summer still looking for jobs. But that's a whole process.
Thank you. And then we also have Arson joining us.
Hello, everyone. I'm Arson, second year transfer. The biggest highlight of my experience was an internship at Amazon this last summer. And before that, while I was in community college, I did an internship at a small company, but that was just like a small startup. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for introducing you guys. So we're going to be asking the panel first some kind of like questions we already have prepared. Then we're going to open up it to everybody. So the first question is, how did you all prepare for your guys' interviews? And then anybody from the panel can go ahead.
I can go ahead. So personally, I actually got into preparing very late because I transferred in and I didn't know about the application process. But for the coding part, mainly lead code and the topics, I was just going through the topics on Geeks for Geeks. And there were some community articles. I'll try to find them and put the link in the chat. The top coder community articles, they were super helpful in like finding a more efficient way to solving problems. And I would specifically recommend to check out the article on binary search. It will help like to avoid the one-off problem that people usually have with the binary search.
I can talk a bit about myself. I didn't really do much leak. I did a little bit of leak code, like I've heard of it in high school, and then that's when I got into computer science. So I happened to do a little bit before then. And then I did a lot more once I came to UCSD campus, hearing that everyone else was doing it. So I practiced that. Spammed leak code questions, honestly. It's pretty hard, but you just gotta spam it sometimes. Some other things I also practiced a lot was being good at articulating questions and also understanding some of the more niche things that people can ask. Like, I think a really common thing that's better than just solving it is also understanding what happens if the problem might get changed a little bit. Because a lot of these phone interviews and technical interviews, they'll always like give you a question and then change a little bit in the middle. For example, one change an interviewer gave me was, given this normal problem, now assume your data is like a million times bigger. How are you gonna handle it? That's a typical kind of change. So being able to handle like changes with that and also being very articulate. Like for example, something I practiced when I did my interviews was talking constantly and not stopping, which maybe is bad for some interviewers, but it works well for me.
Yeah, I mean, more on that. I mean, I think as for like leak code and stuff like that, I'll link a link on the chat, but there's this thing called the blind 75 for anyone that doesn't know. And, you know, leak code has like 1,400 problems. So it's very like not sustainable to go through all of them. So this is a curated list of the 75 most kind of asked problems. And I never really strayed off from this list. It's just an amazing list. I think just if you're on a time crunch, right, and you're trying to get some experience and like you just, because like when I first started leak coding, you're just aimlessly around leak coding, grabbing any problem you want. And it's really good to be deliberate and kind of have this like curation. But yeah, definitely the blind 75. And I mean, I'm also making a Power 25 series too. Which is basically like, even if you're on more of a time crunch, then I'm gonna make 25 problems like videos. That's like the most essential one. So definitely this list. I really think that if you really master all the concepts from this list, you can really, like what Stone said, you can relate concepts of the problems, even though it's not the same problem. So definitely this is very helpful.
All right, thank you. All right, so moving on to the next question is, what did you all learn the most from your guys' first internship?
Something that I learned a lot, especially working at two smaller companies, is like pace, dealing with the speed that other people are working, because you're working with like other engineers that are like twice your age or triple your age, depending on who they are. They're a lot faster, they're more experienced, they can think of the problem much better. So working with them sometimes might be intimidating, but something you learn from it is just learn how to get up to their speed. You learn about the different tricks they use, you learn about their workflow. That helps a lot. And another thing that's nice to learn about is, depending on your company, some companies are very transparent in the fact that they'll tell you everything that goes on in the company. And so once you learn, you can also learn how the company works. And if you ever want to start your own business, you get a good idea as well.
Personally, like for me, my first internship experience, the small startup, like it wasn't even well-formed startup. It was just like a few guys who were trying to kick something off. So I did something very unconventional, which I think no UCSD student should do, because you will get more opportunities as a student from a good school. But I was in a community college, so I took an unpaid internship, but it still paid off really, really well. In the sense that like I got used to like a lot of DevOps, like I got introduced to a lot of DevOps stuff. Just I got a perspective into how everything is done in the industry, people who have been working in the industry. And from my recent internship at Amazon, I just probably the biggest takeaway was understanding how much the code quality and like clean code is appreciated in the industry. Like you might get the illusion that just cracking leak code problems is the absolute most important, but I also read some of the reviews of Amazon's interviewers on the candidates, and behind the scenes, like some companies do not pay attention to that, but behind the scenes, a lot of them like pay a lot of attention to your coding style, like if you keep it clean, if you have everything organized and stuff. So like you also understand that in the industry from the code reviews and everything. So yeah, that was a big takeaway, to pay attention to your practices of coding and developing software.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's just what something. So last summer at ServiceNow, it's more of a bigger company. And like Arson said, it's basically the art of kind of software development and how that plays. I never knew I didn't even know what like agile was coming into that. So it's kind of how code is made rather than making the code. Is that something that blew my mind, how much thought people put into actually, it's really an art, just like creating software. One other thing is like, I think I was really scared about asking questions, especially going in, because I didn't want to be the person that just kept asking people for like help. So one thing that I really did was like basically like load balanced my questions. So like there's a lot of people around me as resources, and I didn't want to hit one person like every single time. So I kind of like load balanced my questions throughout my whole resource circle, so that I wasn't bombarding one person and I was still getting the help I needed. So definitely reach out, and in that way it makes it better, so you're not really kind of distracting one person.
Great tips. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So next question is, what did you guys wish you knew before you landed like your first internship? Like in like the prep, the process, just anything you wish you would have known beforehand.
Um, Honestly, that's a tough question. So for just for the how, all right, let me phrase it better. So what I wish I would know for just the software developing part is I reached out to my manager and I asked more information about the project, but it turned out that there was some like a lot of technology that I was not used to and I didn't know about. And I would suggest to dive deeper into all the technologies that you have used in your resume because they absolutely rely on the fact that you'll be very fluent in it and you will be able to hit the ground running with everything.
Yeah, so I think so this goes both ways. So like for the interview process and the actual internship itself, I think the biggest thing for me is just like confidence. I especially when you're interviewing. So like when you're interviewing or when you're at the job, I think being able to effectively like communicate and just articulate yourself is more important than coding, honestly. Like you can only code like, yeah, like you can be a great programmer developer, but especially if you're in like bigger industry, like it's really important to just know like how to articulate and like know how to conduct yourself, whether it be on an interview, or kind of not. I told a lot of people this, I failed 10 interviews in a row. Not proud of that, but that's just something. It's like I was not confident my first second interview. I was like shaking. Like I thought that I wasn't, like my brain didn't click for the industry. I was like giving myself these kinds of thoughts like, oh, I'm just probably not smart enough to pass these. Like my brain literally doesn't click. And no, it's not a fact of if you know it or not. It's just a factor of, are you confident enough within yourself? Are you willing to put in work and grind, right? So I think confident, if I would look back, I just say, just be confident. Every interview you fail will make the offer that much better.
Yeah. Last question before we move on to the chat questions is kind of going off of the last question too. Like, what was like your biggest challenges you faced and how did you overcome it? Whether it be like also like within the prep, the applying process, or even like on the job. What were like the biggest challenges you all faced?
I think one of the biggest challenges I had was going in between interviews. Um, like between like one round and another. I'm always like thinking like, oh, maybe I failed last round or something, and probably I shouldn't bother waiting for a response or I shouldn't bother following up. Which is definitely the wrong thing. Even though you feel like maybe you didn't do too well in an interview and you feel like you've been really challenged really hard, it's still worth the extra effort to keep following up with their interviewer, asking them what's up with the process, their status. Don't give up on that because it definitely can be really down if you don't do well in one interview and it's kind of obvious. Because for all we know, it could be fine.
I would say communication was the biggest challenge for me. Just because like at a big company like Amazon, like not everything is perfect. There are a lot of layers to everything. So like to complete my project, like I needed a lot of resources from different teams and stuff. And it's not always that the first time you request something, you're gonna get it right away. So you have to be armed with patience and you have to like hone your communication skills so that like even if something takes a lot of time, a lot of like you reaching out to different people and stuff, you have to know how to properly talk to the different teams, talk to the customers and everything. And also big a big part of the work was not writing code, but writing emails. And you also have to work on that to make sure that you have efficient writing skills. So you don't have to write very long text or everything or anything, but know how to make it short and within that short content, put everything you want to convey to someone else.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. So more of the hardships. Like I think I said it a bit before in the last question, but I think more on that is just like like I think last fall it was just this trying to handle with constant rejection. I mean, I don't know how to put it. It just like it sucks. Like I think I got so many. I was fortunate to get a lot of interviews, and I didn't capitalize on any of them. My whole 2019, I was just in a slump because I just every interview that you kind of fail. I mean, when looking back on it, like I was just like, dude, like if I couldn't pass this one, then why couldn't I pass this one? Or like it's just like a snowball effect. So definitely, I would just say to like snap out of it. Everyone, first off, interviews are so much luck based. There's so much luck that gets determined in in interviews, like in general. There's so many variables, so many factors. Even if you nailed an interview, you don't know if you got the offer because of headcount issues. So a lot of it is just luck. Keep your head up. Everything is a learning experience. But yeah, definitely just the fear or just like getting constantly beat down was definitely something that took a toll on me.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, yeah, so we still have around 28 minutes left for the remainder of the workshop. So we're now going to open up questions to the chat. So if anyone has questions for our panel, feel free to message. So, okay, so great question from Andrew. So when did you apply or get accepted into your first internship, and how much CS experience did you have up until that point?
All right, I guess I'll go first. So I started CS in college in winter quarter. So my first year I interned at like a bioinformatics company. It was like a no-name bioinformatics company. But yeah, I think like I applied. I think a lot of people were like, oh, I don't have that much experience. Like I used to be like, I didn't want to do this hacker rank because I want to do leak code 2 weeks first and then do this hacker rank. I think that like I used to think that I don't want to apply for the jobs because my technical skills aren't there. Just shoot the application out. Honestly, you will thank yourself later. A lot of the application headcounts get filled at the beginning. So even if you're not the most qualified, their hiring bar is lower. So like when the headcount starts filling, then the hiring bar gets higher. So just apply. Don't doubt yourself. I started winter quarter of my freshman year. I didn't know how to compile a Java program in CSC 11, and I got like carried on all my PAs. So yeah.
So for my most recent experience, I started applying in October, and I attended career fair the October 2nd, where I visited Amazon's booth, and I heard back from them like probably a week ago, and like I would say generally the process took a month, and when I started preparing, I mean as soon as I started applying, for me it happened simultaneously. So it's considered starting in October is late now that I know, because like I've seen a lot of people already starting to prepare like I wouldn't exaggerate to say that a lot of people start preparing a year in advance, but I started in October, and it was a lot of it was just sheer luck. Just the fact that the question I got was, I mean, was a familiar topic. The fact that I heard back and stuff. So a lot of it is luck. So even if you start late, don't get discouraged. It's just there's so many things happening. Maybe you'll just get lucky.
Awesome. Okay. Oh, sorry, Stone. Go for it.
I was gonna answer the question that someone just posted, but is this for, should I wait?
Oh no, we could just hop right into it. I'll just announce for everybody. So the next question is, how much balance do you guys maintain when applying between bigger and smaller companies?
No balance. Okay, well, okay, kind of. I didn't balance between sizes much. This summer I kind of prioritized, because last summer I already have an internship at kind of just like general software engineering. I've been doing that for a while, so I kind of prioritized my search for more fintech companies or large companies. But typically, if you haven't done an internship before, or like you don't mind, apply to both. It doesn't hurt. You can apply as many as you can, and it's not going to hurt. It's just another entry in the resume database. As awful as that sounds, that's the fact. They don't care. Just apply as many as you want. Apply to, and especially apply to the companies that you really care about as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think when I was doing not my first year, but my second year, I was just applying everywhere, like indiscriminately. For like, I think trying to get your first so getting your first like internship experience just makes all the other ones like a snowball effect better. But back in the time where I didn't have that first like internship, I really wanted it. I was just applying anywhere that I could, small, large, IT roles. um, like anything really just to get some kind of experience over the summer. So I would just say um, yeah, like what Stone said, they'll just have another resume in your database. Don't be like too picky, even though obviously there's some companies that you really want, right? Just I think, for example, funny fact, my first internship I applied for was NASA, and I really wanted to work there. That was my dream. That was my absolute dream. I didn't apply for any company for a month because I was like, NASA's totally gonna like see me, and then they just ghosted me forever. And I was just like, oh man, that whole month I could have been applying to other companies. So I would say not to be as picky.
I mean, it just like the maximum it takes to fill out an application, except unless it's workday, which is horrible. But other than that, the maximum it takes is like a minute or two. So why not just shotgun and apply to all the companies? But for the ones that you are like, I don't think the size really matters that much, because some of the smaller companies are, if we just talk about prestige, they are more prestigious. They have better culture and stuff like that. So the size doesn't matter much, but small, big, no matter whichever you are more passionate about and the company that you are very interested in, you can just put more effort towards it. And by saying effort, I would say try to find an email of a recruiter and reach out to them, or maybe if you have any connection at the company, try to ask for a referral or try to meet someone who works at the company. So I'll just like identify the top 10 companies that you are really interested in so that you can put more effort into it. And I already mentioned what effort means. And for the others, just shotgun and apply everywhere.
Awesome. Okay. Next question from Joseph is, let me pull it up real quick. Are you aware if the difficulty of most OAs scaled on your resume, or is it just based on the position or some other factor? So I can actually answer this question real quick, is that, no, yeah, OAs are just based on the position. If you, actually, normally, if you have like your friend that gets like the same OA from like the same company, most of the time, it's literally like the same question. Sometimes it's mixed up, but the difficulty is around the same. Sometimes like I said, the topics, the questions, are sometimes be very similar or like very different, but the difficulty is normally the same. Funny story is when I first came to UCSD, I applied to Roblox. I did their OA and it was super hard, super hard. I did not pass it. And then recently I applied Roblox again and got the OA as well. And it was the exact same questions, literally the exact same questions. And yeah, some of my friends also got those questions as well. So yeah, normally it's not scaled on their resume. It's normally like on that, like it's just dependent on that position or whatever company, like how high the bar they want to set it. So yeah, don't worry. Don't like purposely make your resume worse for an OA. No, it's generally always all the same. But yeah. Okay. Next question from Michael is, how much did you consider company culture when applying?
Um, Again, I didn't. I just applied everywhere, and the truth is, while you're in school, the job market is employers market. So most of the time, the apply like students are not the choosers. Yes, you can have a few offers from different companies, but I wouldn't really uh, try to differentiate it, in applying to this company or that company. The moment when you can like start differentiating is probably when you already have the offer and you're deciding whether you want to work at a company with the given culture or not. And especially, I wouldn't be too hung up on the culture if for the big companies, because in big companies, like it's very, very, very team dependent. Yes, some big companies um, like from a bird's eye view, they're famous for having this kind of culture or that kind of culture, but it's always team dependent. So take that into account as well.
Yeah, just so I agree with Arsen. I think company culture is nice. I'd say when you're in the position to make that choice, you can. And also a lot of it is just the team. Like Arsen said, it just whatever team you're on can just define your experience, who your manager is, who your mentor is. So yeah, I agree.
Awesome. Okay, moving on. So Kenny asks, there are a fair amount of companies with optional cover letters. How often do you guys write cover letters?
Never did. I don't know if it helps or not. I never did. I don't know.
I wrote one in my life and I never heard back, so I never wrote again. I still got like more interviews from other companies I didn't write for.
Yeah, I no, I'm on that train too. I think a lot of with cover letters are basically if you're trying, like if you have a direct connection with the recruiter, like you're not on a job application site, right? And like you have a direct point of contact, like you kind of know the recruiter. I went to an info session, maybe would write a cover letter, but then again, you can just email them. And I would say that they're really not worth your effort and time. That by the time you're writing a cover letter, you can be applying to 10 more companies. Um, and I've heard it's a rumor that cover letters are just used where there's like they're filling headcount and then they see resume's okay, then they'll maybe take a look at your cover letter. But it's not like it differentiates you in any way. I would just say save your time and just apply with your resume.
I think like the only situation you ever use cover letter, as you said, is like if you have a connection recruiter. I think the other case is like depending on the role. So this is a little bit away from software engineering, but for more advanced positions, you're definitely gonna need this. Like let's say you're applying to be an engineering manager. They don't have 1,000 applications applying for engineering manager, so they're most likely gonna check it out. But this is far in the future. And same applies for like grad school or any other positions where there are limited applications.
Also, one more tip: some companies they have like some field that they require you to fill out, like tell us why you want to work at our company. Like I remember specifically Stripe had a question like that, and even if it's optional, I would always answer those questions, even though you don't have to write cover letters. Those questions definitely do answer, and when you're answering, know that what they're looking for is to see, like they actually care about the content, but it's also 50% they want to see your writing skills, because any software, I already mentioned, any software engineering job is like 50% writing code, 50% writing emails and documentation and stuff like that. So companies do care about your writing skills. So make sure like your grammar is in check and like your writing efficiency.
Yeah, and something to add on just based on my experience to also answer Sid's question is like what you should write in the cover letter. So the roles that I'm applying for are product management, and most of the job responsibilities are like the same, right? It's like you need to know agile, all these frameworks. Whereas like for software engineering internship roles, literally every job posting requires a different set of skills. So me personally, I do kind of like have like a generic one, and kind of like some advice that was given in the chat. It's best just to follow a template, but normally in a cover letter, you just kind of introduce yourself like, hi, my name is Tang. I'm a computer science major at UCSD. I briefly recap my experiences, and I start off the first paragraph like, oh yeah, I'm a good fit for this company because of this, this, and this. And I kind of use that as like my thesis. And like the next two paragraphs kind of dive deep a little bit into like my experiences a little bit more. And then after that, at the end, you always want to tie in at the bottom of your cover letter, like why you're a good fit for that company, you know? So like, yeah, they're generally not worth it because you do have to tailor each cover letter to a certain company. Like, for example, each company has their own values, their own kind of like frameworks and all of that. So it is kind of annoying to like tailor your cover letter to each one. But if you were like Stone said, if you're applying to like a really niche kind of like job posting, or you really want to get into a company, then I would say is like, yeah, take time to like find a template and talk about like mention the company and why you want to work there. But yeah, but for the most part, yeah, it's not really worth it doing a new one for every single company per se. Okay, so next question from Joseph. What do you usually say for these questions that ask, why do you want to work at the company? You spend a lot of time researching on a case by case, or usually there's a trick. So once again, I can just quickly give my experience. In product management interviews, they ask a bunch of questions like this. They also do it for software engineering as well. But yeah, you should normally always research the company by case. I'm pretty sure Arson can talk a little bit more about this, but I believe Amazon, they have these like 14 leadership principles that you kind of have to like know beforehand and talk about it in your interview. But yeah, definitely. For my past like phone screens, I had like 3 last week. Each one I researched the company. And it's also really good to know in case they ask the question like, actually, I was gonna say like, why do you want to work at the company? But also like, why do you want to apply here? So normally when they say why do you apply here, I always go back to like their mission too, and it's really related to like why you want to work here. Like, oh yeah, like I noticed that your company does like a lot of like philanthropy based off of like your company culture page. You guys really foster a really collaborative environment that allows everybody to like speak their own mind and put in their own ideas. So I normally say stuff like that. So it is a little sugarcoating, not gonna lie, in terms of like trying to convince the recruiter that you really want to work there. But yeah, definitely check out the company's website beforehand. See if there's any keywords in terms of like their culture, values, and try to tie that into your answer. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so yeah, we'll wait like
I can also elaborate a bit more on that. Pro tip: check out the company's engineering blog. And well, when you're asking if you do a lot of research on that, like generally, I would suggest to do research on any company before the interview. So I would suggest to check out their engineering blog and like notice something that is kind of peculiar to that specific company in their engineering culture. And if you kind of click with that practice, or yeah, with that practice of software development, bring that up, say, yeah, I saw that they in your engineering, like you do this and that, and I'm interested in it. So that's why I want to work there.
Thank you. Awesome. Yeah. So it seems we have no more new questions in the chat. We'll wait maybe like 30 seconds to a minute. But yeah, thank you to the panel so far for like sharing your insight with everybody. They got really good experience and whatnot. But, yeah, we'll see if there's anybody has like last minute questions or anything. And if not, we can call it a day. Really good workshop. Thank you everyone for showing up.
I have a quick question actually. I was wondering, is there anything you guys think you had in your resume that made you stand out amongst like other applicants, or do you think it was like mostly up to luck?
I think the only time my resume ever stands out is if they ask me about it. Otherwise, it looks pretty bad. Because one doesn't parse. I think it still doesn't parse for some reason. I don't know why. But like one way you can stand out is if you know your product really well in depth and you can explain it really well in depth, and it has some complicated nature to it, it will wow all your recruiters. I think it's one project I did so far has like without fail done well with every recruiter. The only time they hate me is like when I fail the question after this. But otherwise, like just have a passion project, work on something that you really like that's not within class. Like you can do class projects, but typically they're really standard, and you won't be able to explain them about them as passionately as possible. But then if you can explain your own project passionately, maybe a hackathon project or something else, recruiters will see it, especially your technical interviewers as well. They'll see it, and then they'll probe you more, and you'll know the answer to every single question they ask because you made it. And they'll know that you're knowledgeable about this particular topic, and they'll know that you're also interested in working there.
I personally think resume is not just numbers game. I mean, it's numbers game in the sense that you have to apply to a bunch of places and hope to hear back from a few of them. But I definitely know that resume plays a big role because so for the new grad season, so I'm no longer applying for the internships, but for new grad season in the June and July, I kept applying to companies with like with my initial resume, whatever it was, and I wasn't really hearing back a lot, but I made some small changes, like not too big, just like added more data points, changed action verbs and this and that. And it definitely made a difference. I started hearing, I would say like twice more from the companies. And what is the part of my resume that really stands out, I think it would be experience. I think recruiters, the thing they care most about is experience because, and especially I'm pretty sure they're looking for some impressive names, but in any case, like if you can show that you have an experience in even not that at an impressive place, but something that is related to engineering, software engineering, or if you are applying to a different role, whatever you are applying for, experience I think is the most important thing.
Awesome. Okay. Next question, new one from Rakesh is kind of going off of what Arson said, but if you don't have too much experience, would you guys recommend just shooting for smaller companies?
I think for that, I think in a way, smaller companies, some of them are actually way harder to get into than bigger companies. Definitely, if you're going into like unicorn land with those kind of companies that are way smaller scale, those are way more selective. Like they only have around 5 to 10 interns a year. I think Stone could talk about more about that, like because he was at a very selective, smaller company. But definitely like companies that have really high, I think like Microsoft has a really high headcount, or like there's a lot of openings and positions. So definitely it wouldn't hurt to just apply to all of them, especially the bigger ones. Yeah, but I would say the smaller companies are even more selective at times.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit. Funny enough, the company I worked at, well, I think it's pretty selective. They don't actually give you interview questions. They just talk. They just talk to you for an hour, and then if they think you're a fit, they'll measure your resume against everyone else, apparently. But other companies that have applied this quarter there's been quite a few small ones that are high impact but very difficult. Especially like fintech firms, which are very difficult. I probably only succeeded in like one interview for all of those. So yeah, the size doesn't equate difficulty. I recommend you just apply to all of them anyway, unless like the company is like in it. Like, okay, here's one industry you should try to avoid until you're actually good at LeetCode, fintech. That's just hard. It's very rare for people to get through that. But otherwise, apply to everything. I don't think there's any reason why you shouldn't, because I'll tell you, these companies accept you for a variety of reasons. And again, there's also that golden like day or something where like if you apply in the first day, you're much more likely to get the interview, right?
I agree with everything that was said before. And on that note that you'd rather apply early, I would suggest to create a notification on LinkedIn. I think it's called Job Alert. And that as soon as something gets posted, you can quickly apply for that. Because I think Stanley posted it on Discord that you're like very, very likely to hear from back from a company if you apply the first 2 days, and the rest like it goes down like it's exponentially. So yeah, definitely do apply early. And again, the size doesn't equate impact. So small or big, just apply everywhere.
And something add on to that, more of like if maybe you're a freshman or you're like a transfer like me who doesn't have a lot of CS experience coming into UCSD, don't worry about getting an internship. I would honestly focusing on getting like project experience. And what I mean by project experience is by competing in hackathons, doing side projects, because so many times I know a few friends, like mainly from community college, who came in with just literally like 5, 6 side project hackathons, and they got the same interviews as those who have 2, 3 internships. Because projects sometimes, I'm not saying all the time, but sometimes it could even be a better experience than an internship because like you have a bigger impact per se, like not on like the world, because it's like, of course the company's like appealing to like customers, but in terms of like what you build, actually like you probably develop more skills competing, doing a hackathon or your own project, because it's like you're doing it from scratch almost in a sense. So if you don't have any experience, don't sweat it. I'd highly recommend just doing hackathons, coding projects that you think are fun, and try really good experience too is applying to be a tutor. So if you got like an A in a class and it went really good, apply to be a tutor, because also I know David could speak on this. I know Stone's a tutor as well too. Is that like tutors, they also get exclusive like job hiring events too. So it's like you can also like that's like a way, as David mentioned before, a good way to like network, to become a tutor, get all these exclusive job opportunities, have connection to professors. And another one is like other on-campus jobs too. Like I know like the library, the media center, the design supercomputer center, like all these various entities on campus hires kind of like developer interns too. Some of them are unpaid, but it's just like if it's your first experience, that's pretty good. If you have like a position at a school, whether it be kind of like an unpaid intern or like a tutor. So yeah, don't sweat if you don't have so much experience. There's plenty of ways that you can get experience without being kind of like leak coding 24/7 type of thing. But yeah. Okay, yeah, it seems that like we're almost at time to 8:30 and we have no more questions. So I just wanted to give a big thanks to our panel here. Thank you for like your time, your valuable insight. Really appreciate it. I'm speaking on behalf of everybody, ACM as well too. And yeah, thank you everyone who's came out. Me and Dave has been playing this workshop for like almost like before summer started. We were like, we really wanted to do this workshop, provide value to kind of like share our experiences of kind of success and failure to all you guys. And yeah, thank you so much for showing out. And we do have our another resume critique and mock interview workshop next week. So I know David dropped the links. You can also find it in our PowerPoint as well. But we hope to see you all there. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. It was really good.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.